Hi guys, I'm Tina from Tina's Tasteful Treasures. Some of you know me, some of you don't. But today I wanted to do a beginner's guide on air dry foam clay. I know there's still a lot of us that are learning and there's questions, and I want to be able to help you all figure out the best way to work with your clay, especially if you're new to it. Now, I was going to do a live, and I know I told you I was going to do a live, but we also know that if I'm live, I'm getting off track, and I want to make sure you all have the best information I can give you, and it be very informative, especially for those that are new to the clay world. So I hope you all enjoy this. I really wanted to be able to do it, especially real time, so you can see how I work with different things. And I'm actually going to be doing some of my work projects as well. I can't let you see them, but I will be using this clay for certain things that I'm actually working on. So that's why this may actually take a couple days. I don't know, we'll see. But I want you to be able to really get the information. I will be going back and forth between Bose, Annie's, Area 54, Glitz and Glue, and Play Code 3. I haven't even opened this one yet, so before we even get started, I'm going to flip you all around. Actually, I'm going to put you on this side so you can see as I'm working, and we're going to open this together. And I'm going to show you some things that I'm already observing from this clay, and I'll touch it real time. I'm going to go ahead and open it real time with y'all. So hold on and I'll be right back. I know I was going to flip you all around, but first, before we do that, I do get this question asked a lot, so I want to go ahead and do that now while you're this way. This that I'm working on is Polywall. I picked mine up from Home Depot. I've heard that you possibly able to find it at your Lowe's or other hardware stores. Basically, it is like the wall of a shower. And I actually have it here, and it comes in a sheet that's I think it's like 8 foot by 4 foot, and it's very thin. So when you get your big rolls like this, you can cut it down to the size that you need with an X-Acto knife. I even like cutting down rectangle pieces that actually go on my shelving. That's where I drive pieces as well, which I'll show you that not in this video, but at another time. So yes, I will link this in the comments of this video, but again, it's called Polywall, and I pick it up from Home Depot, roughly about $25, but that's what I will be using to work with our clay on. Okay? All right, guys, now that I have you flipped around, hopefully you can hear me because I have the phone actually a lot higher than me, so I will probably have to keep checking to make sure things are on frame. This is the Play Code 3 air dry foam clay in brown. It was sent to me graciously for us to test out with our science experiments, so I'll be making some rings and stuff for this later so we can add it to our group. And then this is the Area 54 brown, and I can already see that there's a difference in colors and browns, so that's the first thing, which is fine. The Play Code 3 brown has definitely a redder hue to it, and let's see if I can. Then the Area 54, which is more on the chocolate brown to me, and this has a little redder to it. Again, not a problem, not an issue. It just depends on the type of brown that you like. And again, it's just showing that there are differences in colors. And of course, that has to do with the differences in manufacturers as well. And that can also play a factor into the way they perform. So the one thing that was told to me about this clay was the bag was busted open, which you can see when it came to me, it was still busted open, but luckily it was in that second bag, which has helped it so it's not dried out too bad. But there are a few places where there's some harder chunks. So we'll just take those out. Now anytime that I have hard chunks like that, what I do is I do save them, depending on the consistency of them. This has changed color, so I probably won't save those, but any others, don't seem to be too many, so we're very lucky. I always save, and then you can cut this up into small chunks and use as chocolate chunks on top of your ice creams or whatever. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take some of this out. And okay, this arrived, gosh, probably a week ago. So I haven't touched it. I haven't messed with it. I always tell you, when you get air dry foam clay in the mail, if you can, let it sit for a couple chunks there. Let it sit for at least a day or two so it can get back to its normal kind of consistency. And then when you're ready to use it, I always make sure I condition it. I do not condition my clay too terribly long, and I'm going to show you. This is about what I would normally do. So I'm going to tell you my first thing that I'm observing about this clay is it is sticky. It's definitely stickier than Glitz and Glue, and it's also stickier than Bose. It's also stickier than Annie's and Area 54. This one has a very, if you can listen, you hear my hands sticking to it? That it definitely has a stickier consistency to it. So more than likely, if I was going to be working with this, it's going to stick. I can already tell. And I would probably let this sit out for 10-15 minutes just to see if it would kind of take some of that stick out of it, but without it drying up. So I'm actually very surprised that it's this sticky. So I'm going to go ahead and try and roll it out. So that's about what I would normally condition any clay that I'm going to work with. And to help alleviate bubbles, I just go ahead and I mash it down like that, and then I take my rolling pin. Now, as you see, there's going to be bubbles. No matter what you do, you're always going to have some kind of bubbles. It depends just, you know, how you want to take care of it. So, if I was going to use this whole piece, say I was doing a cake or, you know, something big that I wanted this piece to be the size. Before I get it to its thickness, what I do is I just go and I kind of pop those air bubbles. Once I get them popped, now if they're bigger ones, you got to take a little bit more finessing to pop them. Like this, you know, is really like a valley. These are little ones, which won't affect too much. So once I do that, then I'll go back to rolling. And then usually, their holes aren't too terribly big, I can kind of get those holes to disappear while I'm rolling. And you see the only one that's really left is that real big one that I did. So then I can keep trying to force it out, which actually I think that might be a discoloration in the clay. Which you'll notice that happens sometimes with some of these clays. The colors don't get mixed all the way, so you'll see where some of the color has needs to be kind of kneaded and mixed in. But yeah, that's something in the clay, not an actual bubble. So no matter how much I keep trying to roll that out, that is not going to come out. And then again, just going to kind of and then roll out those bubbles. And you may see some smaller ones pop up. Smaller ones aren't so bad. They're a lot easier to kind of pop as you're rolling. But again, if they bother you or you want to get rid of them, just go back, pop again, keep rolling. That's one option. Your other option is, if you have this kind of mat, you can always pull it, flip it over, give a good roll on this side, flip it over, and there you go. Most of your bubbles are now gone. So that's your other that's one option. Now your other option is start back over. I'm just going to condition it again real quick. I kind of want to put a couple air bubbles in it, but not at the same time. So you see there's bubbles already forming there, right? So say I'm going to cut out a cookie. And say we'll do this one. All right. So I rolled out more than enough. All right. I have a bubble here, and I know there's a bubble over here somewhere because I saw it. But there's a nice clear spot right here. So what I'll do is I'll just go and put my cookie cutter on the place that's the most, you know, clean, less bubble area. There you go. There's your cookie. Or part of your cookie. One side of your cookie. Alright. I would definitely be careful with this clay if you're using it, because with it being sticky like that, you're bound to leave fingerprints in it. And as you can see, I'll show you that. Styrofoam on my board from something I was working on. So this will happen. I've stained molds. Matter of fact, I recently stained this one. You will stain your board, especially these clays that are highly pigmented, because they will stain anything that's white. So keep that in mind too if you're working with certain, you know, products and things like that, or if you're doing something that's like red and white together, since we're doing Christmas stuff coming up. That red can and will stain. So especially if you're Mod Podging your clay, I always advise, especially if they're dark colors, to wait until they're dry. Normally I say Mod Podge ahead of time, but if they're going to be these darker colors that can bleed, then I would wait until they're dry. The dark purples, the dark reds, the dark browns, all those. So with this, all I will do is take a Clorox wipe and wipe this off, and I'm going to let it dry. So I'm going to do that real quick, and then we'll be right back. The other thing I like to do once my area has been cleaned, just to make sure there's no debris or anything on it, is I will go over it with a lint roller That way, because I do work with a lot of styrofoam, even the little Clorox wipes sometimes can have fuzzies that come off of them. So I'll just go over it with a lint roller or even some packing tape. Anything like that will also work. And that way it just ensures that I'm not having anything else that's going to really kind of, you know, stick into my clay. All right, guys, let's talk cookie cutters. So it's no secret, unless you're new here, that I like the skin from Glitz and Glue for my sugar cookie, my base of my cookies, my waffles, for mostly anything. This is what I like. Now, if you do not have access to this clay because it's sold out or whatever, one of our awesome community members did her first live the other day. Her name is Nikki, and she recommended, and it's actually great, using the Bose Brown mixed with some of the Bose Skin Peach color. And when you do that, you will get, not exact, but a pretty good close color. This is definitely more on the peachy, this is more on the brown, which you could tone this down more with some white, but since I'm out of white, we're going to, well, I'm almost out of white. We're going to do the best that we can, and I'm just going to use this one for right now. That way it'll give us something else to experiment with. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up these colors. You can see there's some where the color didn't mix all the way. And also condition it. Now, I don't know if you're able to see this, but one, there's no stickiness like the Play Coat 3 had. But this is definitely a denser, thicker kind of clay. It definitely has a harder consistency to it. It's definitely not as hard as, say, Model Magic, if you've ever worked with Model Magic, but it's definitely a stiffer clay. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and push it out some with my palm, and you see it's working out some of those bubbles. And it just makes it easier when it's time to roll it for me. You do not have to do this if you don't want to, but it just, to me, it gives it a nice cleaner starting point. I'm going to move this over some because I do have an uneven spot in my table. So if I want to try and keep it as even as possible, I need to, because it's a folding table, so the table actually sits like this. So I try to roll my clay more on, you know, one side or the other, so that way it's not like wonky. And I'm just going to look for a good spot. There's one right here. Now, I do prefer metal cookie cutters over plastic, but I do use plastic often. Any kind of metal cookie cutter that you get will have a thicker side and a thinner side. The thicker side is usually dull, and that's to help with your hand. And then the thinner side is going to be your cutter side, so it's going to be a lot sharper. We'll just go ahead and, once I have it in, I usually just give it a little shimmy just to help make sure that it's cut all the way through. And then there you go. Right. Now, say it didn't come out that clean. Say it was stuck inside. What I would normally do then is I just take a little piece of the clay that I'm working with, flip it over, and I just find a corner, wait for it to grab. Once it grabs, I'll pull it off and then pull out the cookie the rest of the way. Now, if it's stuck in there and I'm sitting here doing this. It's just not coming out. It's stuck in there. Then I'll just take this whole thing and stick it right in the freezer. I'll leave it in there for a minute or so, and usually that will help harden it, so that way I can pop it right out. Now, say I've done everything I needed to. It's still sticking. It's still not doing what I want it to do. What I will do then is I will make sure my cookie cutter is really good and clean. I'll go around it with a Clorox wipe. Then I make sure I dry it really well. Sorry for the noise. Try to put the clay away so I don't forget. But I'll dry it really good. Make sure it, there's no debris, no moisture on it. Try then. Again, if it's still sticking, I'll clean it, dry it. That's where I'll bring the cornstarch in. It does not need a lot, because if you put a lot on it, you're going to get residue on your clay. What I do is I just take my finger, just get a little bit on it, and then I'll just rub around the cookie cutter. And that will usually help stop it from sticking. Next, let's talk about some different types of molds. So this is a waffle pattern mold. This is from Annie's Treasures. It's a smaller waffle pattern. This one here is the smallest one that she has, and I believe it was $7.99. Then there's a bigger one, I think is $13.99. But I can attach her Etsy shop in the comments so you can check them out. So I will also use her clay. Now, anytime I'm using a flat mold like this, or a pattern mold, regardless of what style it is, I always start by rolling my clay out first. I never roll my clay out on the mold, because usually then you get a double, triple pattern, and then you're going to have to end up rolling it out again. So what I do is I go ahead, condition the clay. I'm going to push it out just like I do all the other ones. Just like all the other clays, I'm just going to roll it out. And there was something on my rolling pin. I'm not going to worry about it too much, because actually this is going to end up being the inside of your cone. So then I would just pull this up, put it down onto the pattern. Be very careful. And I'm just going to roll over it one time. Pushing lightly. Now I can already tell that I didn't push here, but that was because I was holding it. So right here is not going to have that waffle pattern. Now if I was doing this on like a bowl or something like that, then I would want to fix that. I would actually roll this out completely and do it again, because if I try to roll over this again, there's a chance I'm going to mess up this part of the pattern. And now if I'm doing like an ice cream cone where I'm wrapping this around a styrofoam cone, then you can just put that to be the inside and it won't matter. The one thing I do like about Annie's mold is it's round, so I can go ahead and cut that off, and that will help give me that rounded cone shape. And I'm just going to pull up from the side here, and there you go. Like I said, you can see where it missed over there, but you have a nice good waffle pattern. And then you can, wrap that however you need to. All right, my friends, let's talk about deep molds. I'm going to use this mold here. trying to think if I need anything in this color right this minute. Of course, the train's gonna go by, so you may hear that. Let me go ahead. Let's do this orange peel from Glitz and Glue. I'm going to go ahead and take some of this out. Again, going to condition it. All right. Now I'm just going to find one that I'm going to put it in. Now when I'm doing these deep molds, I'll take a nice size chunk. Even though I know this is not going to be enough to fill this mold up, it's just enough for me to at least get a good base in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and push this in. And that way I at least know that the bottom is full and should not have any air pockets. Sometimes you can flip it over. At least this one's clear, not clear, but white, so you can see if there was any air bubbles in there, and sometimes you can usually feel them too. So I'm just going to continue pushing that down. Then I'm going to take a little bit more just to fill up the rest of that mold. Now, I'm sure you're going to worry about lines and it leaving marks, and I will show you how to clean all that up after we demold this. So sometimes what I'll also do is I'll go over it with my rolling pin just to make sure it's good and in there. Now with this mold and molds like this, it's not very stiff. It's a thinner type material. It's very squishy. So sometimes when you're pushing this in, this will actually pop out. And then if it does, I just go back and I do this just to push it back into the shape that it needs to be. So as you see right now, it's good and full. It's actually over full, but again, we can trim that down once we pull this out. At this point, I would not try getting this out of here. You are going to have an issue trying to get it out. Any deep molds or any molds that have a lot of detail to it, I don't even bother with trying to demold once I put them in there. These will go straight to the freezer. So I'm going to put this in the freezer right now. We're going to come back, work on a few other things, and then we will pull this out of the freezer at the end. All right. So say you have a mold that's like this. This is a chunky macaron mold. I believe I got this from Soap Level US. I will have to check on that to make sure. And I'm going to use some of my Glitz and Glue clay. This is the hot pink, but I have toned it down a little bit with some white. Now for these molds, basically, oops, some chocolate, basically do the same thing. I kind of get an idea of how much I think I'm going to need. I go ahead and put that in. I'm going to go ahead and do both sides at one time. Again, I'm going to push it in. And you can see as I'm pushing, like it expands the hole some, which is fine. It just makes it a little bigger, or you can just push it back and it'll get it back into that shape that you need. Then I'll go over it, the rolling pin. And then with these, because it's not a very deep set, you can just unmold it right out. Now, I know we've gone over this before, but I want to go over it again quickly here in the getting to know your clay beginning, whatever we're going to call this. So I'm going to use some of the Glick & Glue clay again, and I'm going to roll out a worm very quickly. I just want to show you all. I know I've showed you in the live when we did slaying the clay. I believe it was part 2, which was a live. But I'm going to show you real time how I do this. And hopefully close enough so you can see. I know when you're looking from the other way, it can be a little bit harder to see real up close at what we're doing. So I'm just going to take off a little bit. I just conditioned it real quickly. And I always kind of start in my hands first to try and kind of get it all around the same. Then once I get it going, then I'm just going to start rolling it out on my board. I'm not pushing very hard. You do not need to push hard. If you push hard, then it's going to roll unevenly. So I always work from left to right, like when I read. Other people like to start from the middle and work their way out. It's just whatever's most comfortable for you. But you have to make sure that no matter where you're rolling from middle to out to left, from right to left, from left to right, that you do the same amount each place. If you don't, then you're going to get a very uneven roll. And if you take too long, it's going to start to dry. Now, clays like Model Magic and some of these other air dry clays dry fairly quickly. So if you are taking your time to roll out your worm, they're going to start to dry and then it's going to crack. And you just go ahead and roll it up. And there you go. All right. So the quicker you move with it, the less pressure you use on it, the less likely you're going to get that cracking and drying when you're doing your worm. So I hope that helps with, some of you. Again, not all of us do it the same way. That's how I do it. So try that technique. If that works for you, great. If not, there's lots of other ways, but I find that to work best for me. The other question I get asked about a lot is my rolling pin. My rolling pin is from Hobby Lobby. I believe when it's not on sale, it's $9.99. It's in the baking section. If you go when the baking stuff is 50% off, you can also get it 50% off. I know Walmart has a version like this also, but theirs is slightly different than this one. There's also ones that are like this that are smaller. Those I like also if I'm doing smaller pieces. And what's nice about some of those smaller ones is they have rings on the end of them. They're usually like a red, blue, and yellow ring. Those rings are for thickness. So if you are beginning and can't always get your clay the same thickness every time you're rolling, using those rings on the end will help. I know some people also use popsicle sticks and stir sticks and things like that to help be a guide. I've just done this so much that I just roll it how I like it. It doesn't make any difference to me, but it's really up to, you and what you want. So before I got my poly wall, I was using parchment paper to roll on. As long as I had something hard that I can press down on, because this table is not always the most sturdiest thing, I would use a piece of stone and use my parchment paper on that. It does work. It's doable. But the only thing with parchment paper is you got to be careful. It will leave creases on the back of your pieces. just because the paper will kind of crinkle up as it's drying. You know, you don't have that issue with the Polywall. The other thing you can also use is silicone. Now this is a very large silicone mat that I picked up from Amazon. I can link it down below. As you see, it's starting to get wrinkled. I don't use it very often anymore. So it kind of sits in a drawer gathering wrinkles, but I always have it around just in case. The one thing I do like about silicone, and I actually learned this back when I was doing nails because I would use silicone mats for that as well, is even though like it's been washed and there's stuff on it, normally if you go over it with a lint roller, I don't know about that, not sure what that is, but any of the paint and stuff like that, you can pick it up with a lint roller, which is really nice about silicone mats. So same thing with like fingernail polish. When I would do stamping, I would do it on my silicone mat, and if I needed to take it off, I just used a lint roller. So that's a nice way to clean it up. So again, you can also use a silicone mat to roll out on. I would be careful with this one that I currently have because again, you have these wrinkles in there, and sometimes, you know, drying isn't the best on these either. But if you have to have an option of, you know, one thing or another, I would go with the silicone more than I would parchment. So, and I like this one again because it's nice and big, and I think it may have came with two, I don't remember, but like I said, I will link it in the comments under this. But I always keep it around because you just never know. But it's a good option, but it will have glitter and everything else stick to it. Alright, this mold has been in the freezer for, well, probably at least a good hour, if not longer. So we're going to go ahead and take this out. And as you see, it is not perfect, and that happens. Not all the ones that come out of these deep molds come out like you want them to. So what I do if this happens is I just go and while it's thawing, I rub just like I would when I'm putting my clay on a cake or something like that. When there's lines, usually I would get a little bit of water into it, but since this is frozen and there's moisture on it from being in the freezer, I just use that residual frost and moisture to go ahead and rub those lines and stuff out. And you'll see they're starting to go away. Now, something else about molds when you freeze them, they're frozen. They're not actually dry, which means at any point in time you don't like the way that this looks, it's not working for you. Got glue stuck to my thumb. I'm working on projects in between. It's not doing what you wanted to do. It's not, you know, smoothing how you like it. There was, you know, too much missing. You can actually, as it thaws out, just go ahead and squish this back up like you would your normal clay, stick it back in the mold, and do it again. But as you see, all these lines just from me doing this are now starting to go away. And another thing, if it's not how you like it exactly, glitter does wonders. But most of this, and then this is that extra, you can either just pull it off or just take your scissors, cut off any of that extra that, you know, you don't like, and then as you're still going around, just kind of push it down. See, as I'm doing this, the heat of my thumb on that clay as it's thawing is just rubbing those lines out. See how they're just disappearing as I'm rubbing them? So that's a quick way to fix anything that comes out of like these molds. Now you see it's already looking so much better. And with this being a nice chunky mold, I'll show you what you can do. Is you can add a little dripping, put it on the stick, and make a little pop. Now I tried doing different colors on this one, but they just didn't, I didn't do enough pink. I did too much green, not enough pink. But yeah, and then you can add some glitter, sprinkles, whatever. So that's probably what I'll do with this one as well. Or I may just glitter this one, because I have something that I'm working on. I don't know if I'm going to put this one on a stick or not. But as you see, already those lines are almost gone completely. And the more that I sit here and I play with it, the more they're going to go ahead and start going away. Just be careful. You don't want to rub too hard, because you don't want to mess up the detail of the ribbon. So that just shows you that not everything that comes out of a mold is going to be perfect every time. But if it does come out not perfect, you can always fix it. And there you go. So it's already looking much better. I'll still sit here and play with it a little bit more, but I want to go ahead and... Hi guys, I was just getting ready to post the Clay for Beginners guide, but then I realized that as I was editing it, it brought up a question for me, and I'm sure some of you may have that same question with that mold. The last thing I was working on was that ribbon candy mold, and I was showing you how to get those lines out. So this is it dried after a day, and you see all those little lines are pretty much gone. I mean, there's just like, I mean, a faint, it's really, really hard. Let me see if I can cover up my face. Like very faint lines. Like once you coat that with Mod Podge or triple thick or whatever it is that you like to use, you're not going to see any of those. And then if you decide to glitter it or whatever. So mostly I was able to get all those little lines out, and that was just from rubbing them while it was still half frozen, while it was thawing out, just with my fingers, no extra water, no nothing, because the frost and all from it being frozen acts as that extra water that we would do if we were smoothing out lines. So I hope that helps. I hope that answers any questions that may have arisen about that mold or how to fix those things. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask them. We will be doing more of our clay series. I just really wanted to focus on those I don't want to say beginners, because some of us still need to remember, you know, those things, but the basics. There we go. Not beginners, the basics. Because sometimes we still need help with those things. You know, sometimes our clay just doesn't act right and things like that. So again, if you have questions, always feel free to ask them. I, again, hope you found this very informative. I'm sorry I didn't do it as a live, but we all know I get sidetracked very easily, and I would have been sitting there chatting with y'all about all the things that probably wasn't clay, and I wanted to make sure you all got all this information the best that I could and make it very informative and very kind of, I don't know, yeah, I don't want to say professional, because we know there's nothing about me that's professional, but you know what I mean. So again, hope y'all have a fantastic evening. I will see you all again real soon. Bye.